Hello, this is Stephanie Tsai and Megan Van Pelt, and this is our midterm research assignment. The article that we reviewed and will be discussing here today is called Diversity in Public Education, Acknowledging Immigrant Parent Knowledge. The author and researcher is Guo, and the year of publication is 2011. To give you some background and context for the research study, this study occurred in Canada, where approximately 20% of the population speaks a first language that is neither English nor French, the most common languages spoken in Canada. The author points out that literature about immigrant parents promotes a common theme that immigrant parents have a deficit. When it comes to teacher preparation, it is found that teachers are underprepared to work with immigrant families. On the issue of religion, there is a general fear of Muslims due to a lack of understanding of their religious culture. And when it comes to the education curriculum in Canada, the curriculum tends to focus on Eurocentric perspectives, thus leaving out the value and importance of the cultures and perspectives that immigrants bring with them to Canada. The purpose of the study is twofold to answer the two following central questions. 1. What is parent knowledge regarding their ESL children's learning? And 2, how can parents utilize this knowledge to promote their child's learning? Some important definitions. 1. Immigrant parent knowledge. According to Jones, the knowledge that immigrants hold about their children is often unrecognized by teachers and school administrators. And this is connected to the deficit model of difference, which leads to the belief that difference is equal to deficiency. Transcultural knowledge of construction. The idea that individuals in immigrant societies of the New World change themselves by integrating diverse cultural lifeways into dynamic new ones. And you will see some evidence of this when we discuss the immigrant parent interviews later on in this presentation. The theoretical framework. The ideas of fear of diversity and difference as deficit. As discussed previously, it is found that teachers lack knowledge and readiness to approach cultural and religious diversity. And these are issues that are tending to occur in classrooms with these immigrant children. The idea of difference as deficit. This model sees diversity ignored, minimized, or as an obstacle to the learning process. Rethinking immigrant parent involvement. Parent involvement models tend to favor North American middle-class families, thus leaving out the contributions or potential contributions of immigrant families. Immigrant parent knowledge. Schools must connect curriculum with cultural knowledge rather than focusing only on Eurocentric perspectives. And now a discussion of Guo's perspective. Race and class are main factors affecting whether or not or how parents get involved in their children's schools. It was cited that among Black parents, those in the middle class are more strategic in intervening in their children's schools. Additionally, there are conflicts that exist between working class values and those values which are promoted and rewarded in schools, which are primarily geared towards middle class and upper class values. When school personnel utilize the deficit model, they fail to recognize the important contributions that immigrant parents bring with them to their children's education and to the school learning environment. And finally, knowledge is socially constructed. It is important to note that in this study, Guo was both the researcher and the interviewer of the immigrant families. Demographics. 38 immigrant parents from 15 different countries were interviewed for the purposes of this study. Among their countries of origin were China, Korea, Vietnam, Nepal, Philippines, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Algeria, Ghana, Somalia, Sudan, Colombia, Belize, and Suriname. Among these 38 immigrant parents, 25 different languages were spoken. All but one of these parents had much higher than average education, with only one of them only holding a high school diploma. However, upon relocating their families to Canada, these families had experienced serious downward social mobility. The methods for the study. Guo conducted 60 to 90-minute interviews of the 38 immigrant parents. and asked how parents' knowledge of Canadian education system was acquired. Guo utilized an inductive analysis strategy. After all of the data was collected, the data was then sorted into domains. It is important to note that these domains were not created prior to the interviews, but rather after the interviews based on the data that came out in the interviews. Some of the findings. Cultural variations contributed to misunderstandings between students, parents, and teachers. This is linked to what we discussed previously about lack of teacher preparation. From interviews, it was clear that parents possessed the following types of knowledge about their ESL children's learning. Parents possessed cultural knowledge, first language knowledge, religious knowledge, and parent knowledge about mobilization and advocacy, and we'll discuss these in detail on the following slide. So some of the findings with examples. Parents possessed cultural knowledge, and Guo concluded this from stories about teachers' misinterpretations about students' behaviors being disrespectful. And these were students that were actually demonstrating respect according to their home culture's norms. Parents possessed first language knowledge. Parents reported that schools were not acknowledging their children's home languages, but that having their children stay in practice with their first language was very important to these families because it tied the children to the family's cultural heritage. Parents possessed religious knowledge. Muslim parents reported that schools and peers misinterpreted their daughters' headscarves. Additionally, parents desired that their requests to not have children integrated by sex, or dancing or swimming with the opposite sex, or wearing bathing suits. They wished that these requests were honored by the school rather than frowned upon. Parents mobilized their own knowledge. There was a discussion of a Korean parent that learned that, unlike in Korea, in Canada, it was appropriate to contact a teacher and initiate a conversation about the student, rather than in Korea, assuming that the teacher would initiate the conversation or that the teacher would be responsible for it. And finally, parents instilled knowledge in their children to advocate for themselves. A Muslim parent spoke about teaching her son to stand up for himself against teasing about his religion. And another parent taught her child to speak up and advocate for herself, as well as advocating for other immigrant children. To further our discussion on the importance of understanding parents' cultural knowledge, it's important that teachers examine their own biases and attitudes prior to misjudgment. As most of us in this program are teachers, or at least have been teachers, and are planning to be administrators, it is important that we understand our own biases so that we do not misjudge the students that come to our school who are from different cultures than we are. On the importance of first language, it is important to embrace multilingual education, as students need language, particularly their first language, to affirm their identity. On religious diversity, according to the author, public schools are obliged to accept religious symbols, things like the headscarves, or covering up during swim time, or refraining from activities such as dancing with other sexes. And on advocacy and capacity building, parents used personal knowledge to empower their children to stand up to discrimination and racism. It is important that we as schools also support this. Some theoretical implications. Schools and educators must recognize parent knowledge. They must recognize cultural parent knowledge, first language knowledge of parents, and religious knowledge as well. We in schools must move beyond the deficit model. We must not see difference as a deficit. And we must improve model forms of parent involvement to encourage immigrant parents to get involved and contribute to the extent that they can in our schools. Some practical implications. Schools need to learn immigrant parents' views on education and cultural differences on homeschool communication. The school might see communication in one preferred method or offer one preferred method, but schools need to be aware of what immigrant parents are comfortable with. Schools need to become places of learning where everyone learns from each other. It should not just be students learning from teachers, as we've read in other literature. It needs to be teachers learning from students, students learning from students, students learning from teachers, and so on and so forth. Home cultures, backgrounds, and language must be incorporated into the curricula because this is a way to express value of those things. Take the time to talk to all parents and learn their stories. Another practical implication, are public schools in America required to inform teachers on the religious practices of its students? And finally, teach religious tolerance and teach about religious diversity. Some connections to other areas of coursework. As future leaders, and even now as current classroom teachers, we need to recognize the diverse student populations that we teach. Additionally, we need to encourage parents to share their cultural wealth and knowledge with us, with our classrooms, with our students, so that we can all understand each other better. This article ties to what we've read so far on Freire's ideas that teachers and students need to be both teacher and student in order to construct meaningful knowledge about each other and particularly about each other's cultures. A few limitations we noticed on the study. There wasn't any discussion of observations being conducted, and we thought that that might be helpful to actually observe the interactions between students and teachers. Were teachers and administrators interviewed? It didn't appear so by the article. It appears that only, or it was reported, only that parents of immigrant children were interviewed. However, it would be important to hear from the teacher's perspective. Did they feel that they were underprepared, or did they recognize that they were underserving or not engaging with immigrant families? Additionally, it would be important for the administrators to be aware of this as well. And were any students interviewed? All of the stories were told kind of secondhand by the parents based on what the students had come home and told the parents, and then the parents relayed to the researcher Guo. But it would be important to hear the students' voices because sometimes events are experienced and interpreted differently. Our overall evaluation. We do recommend the article, but we would like the readers to be aware of the aforementioned limitations of the study above. That there was not really a multifaceted approach to research here, as it was just interviews of the parents of immigrant children rather than the children themselves or the other role players involved. Any questions or comments? Please pose any questions to us or write comments under our post on Module 4. Thank you so much for listening.